Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I had a cold recently. My voice is still a little bit hoarse. That and jet lag doesn't make things easy, so please excuse me if I seem to be, if my voice is not at my best, or if I seem to still be a little bit drowsy. But I'm human. I'm vulnerable to time, to space, to weather variations, and so on. We all know how it is, right? Okay, anyway, it's a great pleasure and an enormous honor to be here with you in Athens and to be a keynote speaker for this great event, especially to be here in this city that is itself holds layers of histories of the commons. From the agora, the ancient, noble, even a sacred agora, to contemporary community-led archives of memory and resistance. Let's think of examples such as ASCII, the Contemporary Social History Archives, and the Exarcheia, I hope I'm pronouncing it well, the Exarcheia Self-Organized Library. These are examples of how memory can be curated, protected, and also reactivated as a political as well as a cultural commons. And today, we gather not only to celebrate the achievements of GLAMMONS project, but also to reflect on where we go from here. As crises mount, climate collapse, increasing economic polarity, not to speak of political or politicized polarization, the commons reemerges not merely as a set of practices, but as a framework for a livable future. Maybe the only livable future we can think of, to be absolutely honest. And yet, the key challenge we face is not only to defend or expand individual commons-based projects, but to connect them in networks. Networks of information, networks of mutual support, and yes, networks of financial support, in order to make them more resilient, not only internally, but also to external shocks, and to variations in political cycles, which determine whether or not certain public financial resources are accessible to commons-based projects. Michel Bauwens and Jarons once said that this process of networking, or of connecting commons-based projects or community-led initiatives into networks, can be called intercommon or intercommoning. This is a concept that we should all take into consideration and reflect upon. My keynote contributes to the thematic area, networks and intercommoning, by exploring how networks of diverse commons, cultural commons, or better speaking, cultural commons infrastructures like physical infrastructures, digital commons, agroecological commons, for example, permaculture projects, eco-villages, and so on, and economic commons, like microcredit initiatives, can collectively enhance the resilience and transformative capacities of cultural commons, such as what we call here the so-called GLAMS. If we interconnect them and promote greater collaboration between different types of common-based projects. The concept of intercommoning refers to the process by which different commons-based initiatives collaborate, co-create, and mutually support one another through shared values, practices, and infrastructures. Unlike single issue or isolated commons, intercommoning implies the building of ecosystems of commons or networks of networks, like matryoshkas, you know, the Russian dolls, which operate across sectors and scales. I wish I had found a nice matryoshka picture to put here, but you know, I wasn't able to find like a nice one that would fit. But I'm sure you can imagine it. You can imagine it as a metaphor, right? Okay, this kind of matryoshka framework builds on and extends the concept of commons and commoning. understood as collectively managed resources and social systems that prioritize equitable access, reciprocity, and long-term sustainability over profit maximization, or at least they should, right? When commons-based initiatives interact through networks, social networks, digital networks, or networks of institutions or organizations, they form what has been termed networks of commons, or commons constellations, in the words of Silvio Federici, which enable distributed governance, resilience, and connective capacity building, at least in theory. In practice, that might be a little bit different. Moreover, intercommoning intersects with the idea of networks of community-based initiatives, those grassroots and place-based projects that arise in response to local needs, but benefit from translocal cooperation and solidarity. They facilitate peer learning, mutual aid, and co-governance among those initiatives, strengthening their autonomy and collective impact. What we call GLAMS, galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, have long been thought of as custodians of heritage, culture, and knowledge. But we must go further. We should reframe them as cultural infrastructures of the commons. As shown in the experience of the Ecomuseu of Barroso and Cooperativa Terrachã, both in central Portugal, an area that unfortunately is every other year plagued by massive forest fires, but where the local community, in a great show of resilience, manages to bounce back and rebuild not only their own community infrastructures, but also the ecosystem. Museums and archives have been transformed into living systems that merge memory, livelihood, and ecological stewardship, therefore supporting socio-ecological resilience. Other illustrative examples include the Ökodorf Siebenlinden, Eco-Village Siebenlinden in Germany, which combines ecological living with community-led cultural education, not only within the eco-village itself, but also to the wider society. Another very interesting example is Can Batlló in Barcelona, a reclaimed industrial site managed by local cooperatives that integrates cultural, economic, and housing commons, using their cultural infrastructures to give a great service to the wider community. Commons-based cultural infrastructures are institutions, spaces, and networks that produce and distribute cultural value through collective stewardship, participatory governance, and shared access. They are anchored in the principles of the commons: self-management, reciprocity, and the co-production of knowledge and meaning. Unlike market or state-centric models of cultural provision, these infrastructures view culture not as a commodity or public service alone, but as a shared resource embedded in place, memory, and community. Even if the services provided by these infrastructures bring some sort of profit or rely on some sort of public support or philanthropic support, these sources of support are not central to their model. They're like, they're part of their economic model, but they're not the core of that very same model. Profit is not an end in itself. Getting government subsidies is not an end in itself. They are means to an end. Examples from across Europe include the social center Macau. I'm not talking about the Asian city. I'm talking about the social center in Milan, Italy. There's Media Lab Prado in Madrid, and also the ZQU in Berlin, which exemplify autonomous cultural production and democratic governance rooted in commons thinking. In Greece, here in Greece, we see vibrant examples such as the Nosotros Social Center in the Exarcheia, and also the communitism project in, I hope I'm pronouncing this properly, in Metaxorgeio, which is, yes, it's correctly good. Metaxorgeio, which from what I know, is recovering public buildings and transforming them into cultural infrastructures for community. This is the information I got. Please correct me or complement the information I have if necessary. There's also the so-called School Wave Festival, organized by the non-profit cultural organization Schooligans, a youth-led commons-based music initiative here in Athens. In Latin America, there are spaces such as the Casa de Cultura Comunitaria in Quito, Ecuador, and also the Red de Cultura Viva Comunitaria in Colombia. These networks and their infrastructures emphasize local knowledge and cooperative art practices. Meanwhile, in sub-Saharan Africa, there's the Nubuke Foundation in Ghana, and also the Go Down Art Center in Kenya, which promote cultural production under community ownership and governance. These infrastructures are globally proliferating responses to the inadequacy of the state and market solutions as we know them, to the needs of the cultural sector, and also to the wider social needs that this form of cultural infrastructures want to fulfill. Brazil, an example that I know well. I'm from Portugal, but I lived in Brazil for 4 years. I did my doctoral and postdoctoral fieldwork there, among other things. It's like my second home after Europe. Brazil presents a rich landscape of solidarity economy infrastructures. From the National Solidarity Economy Forum, which gathers state-level and municipal-level solidarity economy forums, to vibrant local experiences, multidimensional experiences like Banco Palmas in Fortaleza, which started as a community-led microfinance mechanism and nowadays includes cultural infrastructures and also community-led infrastructures for welfare provisioning. There's also the amazing Esperança com Esperança network in Santa Maria, in the state of Rio Grande do Sul, started by an ecclesial-based community, which managed to recuperate a local abandoned market and turn it into a marketplace for the commercialization of agricultural goods by farmers which were displaced by multinationals that wanted to take over their lands to produce tobacco. So these farmers, which were displaced, whose health was put at risk, and who could not commercialize their produce in globalized chains, they managed to find a space for commercializing their agricultural goods and also manufactured goods in that marketplace, which also became a place of cultural production and cultural expression, cultural performance, and also a place of political mobilization. During my fieldwork in Rio Grande do Sul with Esperança com Esperança, I noticed that many protest marches were organized at that very same marketplace that holds weekly markets for those people. And many of those marches actually began at that marketplace. So this is like a focal point in the city and in the region, not only for counter-hegemonic cultural production, but also for political activism. During my fieldwork, I also had the privilege of witnessing that this marketplace became a place for public debates between political candidates for municipal elections, and also for state and national elections. Really amazing. This shows how counter-hegemonic, community-based cultural production is very strongly linked with democratic deepening and democratic participation. Further notable Brazilians include the MST, Movimento dos Trabalhadores Rurais Sem Terra. Actually, Esperança com Esperança also hosts a lot of farmers who are connected to MST. They have selling places at that marketplace, and they're very present, not only in the weekly markets, and also in the special markets like the Christmas market, the Easter market, and so on. but they are also present in the collective governance of this project. And the so-called catadores, the recyclers, are also very present. The catadores are people who are very poor, very marginalized, and who make a living out of sorting trash and transforming recyclable trash into things that can be reused, brought back to the economic cycle. Elsewhere in Latin America, of course, there are the Zapatista cooperatives in Chiapas, Mexico, and also the recuperated enterprises in Argentina, the so-called recuperated factories. I know that Greece got a lot of inspiration from this experience. In North America, the Solidarity Economy Network lives on, even under Trumpism, in places like New Orleans, in Massachusetts, in Chicago, and so on. There's also in Quebec the Chantier de l'économie sociale, solidaire, the network of social solidarity economy, which supports the network in Brazil, in the United States, and also in Europe. And it links grassroots initiatives to policy innovation. In Europe, there's REAS, the Spanish Solidarity Economy Network in the Spanish states, and also the network of social solidarity economy in France, which champion horizontal finance and democratic management as vehicles for cultural regeneration. And they are part of REPAS Europe, the European node of the Intercontinental Platform for Social Solidarity Economy. The concept of intercommoning draws on a growing body of literature that frames the common as more than a static resource. It is a dynamic, processual mode of social organization. It is thus more than a process of collaboration. It is a method for generating and maintaining shared political, social, and economic ecosystems. Ecosystems based on infrastructures such as federated digital platforms, municipalist legal frameworks. It's important to co-opt the support of progressive municipal governments, and also place-based education, such as the Escuelas de los Comunes in Madrid, or the Escola da Cidadania in São Paulo. It's important to think about alternative forms of education as part of the cultural commons and as part of the cultural commons infrastructures. These practices embody what Arturo Escobar terms the designs for the pluriverse, systems rooted in ecological and cultural interdependence that resist the universalizing logic of the market. This includes arts-based inquiry, popular education, and community-led mapping of alternative initiatives. There are several examples. I know that I don't have much time left, but I can tell you more during the Q&A. There are examples all across Europe and beyond. I can tell you more about it, and also about the connection between financial, material, and so-called affective infrastructures, like rituals, festivals, storytelling, and commemorative practices that affirm collective identity and resilience by fostering friendships and intimacy among people. Yes, let's think beyond the merely instrumental. Let's think about what truly makes us human, which is the capacity not only to create meaning, but also to create affective ties. And I want to call your attention to this capacity of meaning making and attributing meaning, because myth making and myth making is at the core not only of makes us humans, but also what makes us free beings and not mere instruments of fate. We are not mere instruments of forces that transcend us. We are not mere instruments of the will of the gods, like ancient classical mythology claim we are. Be they in the Olympus, be those gods traders in investment banks, or be those gods influencers that promote authoritarian discourse based on an in-group or out-group logic. we should not be naive. The language and practice of community building is very often co-opted by very dark forces. By the far right, for example, which appropriates terms like community, the will of the people, and even creates cultural commons infrastructures for very sinister aims. I can give you an example. Casa Pound in Italy, which co-opted the structures, the processes of popular education, and even the language of progressive social centers and progressive social movements for the sake of promoting right-wing nationalism. There's also the case of the cultural machinery of identity building that promotes not only socioeconomic exclusion, but also war and genocides, as we unfortunately have to witness every day on our social media feeds and on the mass media. Thank you for your attention.